So next we want to add the lid of the cup, and very important for the lid, of course, is that it should be on the top. Now, of course, we could be boring and just add up our cylinder again like that, and then just push it up with G and Z here. But we are the cool kids who know all the commands, and thus we save ourselves some work. So we press 2 on the keyboard, so we're in the edge select mode, and we press Q and edge loop, and then press Shift S for the snap menu. We also discussed that before. Then we pick cursor to select it, and we have the cursor right in the middle here. And the cool thing about a 3D cursor is that it's exactly in the right place where we can add our object now if we press the Shift A menu. However, we can of course add a cylinder again, but we're not going to do that. It's actually easier for us if we add a circle, and we'll bring the vertices back to 64 so we have the same resolution. And as you can see, it's sort of added up here. Now, we can take it now, push it up a little with GZ, and with a bit of scaling, here we go. We can get it to edit mode, press F, and voila, we made a face out of this circle. It's important for modeling of any kind, especially when it becomes a bit more specific, that you have some sort of a reference. To do this, I simply call up an image editor to open a reference image. I found this reference image on the internet. And actually, this is a 3D model of a mug, which you could also download, but come on, we're not boring. We're here to learn modeling, not copy and pasting. We want to do our own thing, of course. I want to teach you modeling. So now we're going to scale our face so that it pretty much fits over the edge. Press G, Z, and move that down a bit. And now we have a top cover with a face in the middle. But it's actually a lot easier now to continue working with extrusion, which is why we don't need this face in the middle at all. But we do want to keep the edges so we can continue working with them. Now, if you would press X, you would delete everything, but that's not what we want. So we press X and then we select only faces. And as you can see now, just the face is removed and the outline still stands, which means that all the edges and vertices on the border are preserved. And that means if we now press E here, we can create new faces upwards and downwards with extrusion. And that is exactly what we want. Of course, I did all this on purpose because I wanted to demonstrate that there is an option to just delete the faces. Of course, I haven't forgotten that all this does not make a lot of sense in the first place. Okay, so now we press E to extrude, and we want to extrude the whole thing downwards. That means EZ. Now, as you can see in the example, there's little nubs there, and under those nubs, we have a little dip in the back, so to speak. These are all things that we can easily make. We also have another small area at the bottom, which we can now create very quickly by pressing E again, and then Z again. And then we would be here. Also, it's important to know that completely hard edges are unrealistic, so that means we briefly press E and Z again, and we scale it so that it doesn't necessarily press too much inwards. Maybe move GZ, so a bit E for extrusion, and now S again to make it smaller. I practically didn't move while extruding, I just extrude it. Now, we have that little geometry again below. We do the same as always. We go to the edge selection and then simply press Alt-Z on the keyboard, which in the picture is the so-called X-ray view. This means that we can now select faces that are visible on the front, but also on the back, which is actually not visible from this perspective. And that's very helpful for us at the moment, because now we can see the faces in the back, which normally would be covered in the front. So if we press Alt-Z on the keyboard, the X-ray mode is enabled, and then we can select the 3 edges right here. Awesome! Now we press Q, edge loops, shift space via Control B, and we already got to know everything for the bevel tool that we explained earlier. Okay, be careful, make sure there's no overlap, and bam! Now we can bevel the whole thing. So you see, Alt-Z is also possible in object mode, but only when we are in solid shading and not when we are in material preview or even in render. And you can see that down here as well. X-ray not available in current mode is what it says. By the way, all error messages come up in the bottom center of the screen. These are all the error messages in Blender, and you know, if something doesn't work, I think it's also a very helpful tip to simply know what's going on if something doesn't work. Anyway, enough babbling. We need another loop cut in the middle here, so to speak, which we don't have yet, but which we should have, so that we can then push it in and make these little extrusions on the top. And that works with the so-called loop cut tool. We can simply select it, and you will see that the loop cut tool, depending on where you have your mouse, then offers you different options. Just left click, set the loop cut, and then this loop cut and slide menu will open at the bottom left. And here we can actually increase or decrease the number of loop cuts that we want. I just want to have one loop cut here, which means that it can stay that way for now. So I take this loop cut again and then I press S. And this pushes the loop inwards a bit, and that's exactly what we want. But as you can see, the edge of our cup is way too big and too high. So we click SZ, and then we can actually even put in something like, I don't know, 0.6 or something, and then we actually are where we want to be. Now, of course, we have these little things here, which of course are no fun right now. Now, what we want to create is that the back of the indentations is a bit thicker than the front. For now, we want to subdivide subdivide this edge loop here. So let's break it down into smaller sections again, and that's relatively easy. We just right-click and press subdivide. And then we can see that points are being added. If we want more points, we can just press subdivide again and press subdivide again. The way I'm doing this right now may be a bit unorthodox, but I don't really care. I'm going to move my cursor there now, and now I'm going to select these 3 dots here and press F. And then I'm selecting these 3 dots here and press F again. And now we can select the 2 faces that I just created and press Y. We now stay in the same object, but you can just move it around freely. This means that if I now move this, the points below that I used to create it won't move. However, we can now make that a separate object, and for that we press the P button, and then we choose separate by selection. And by connecting these things together, we just created a very simple object in a separate fashion. And the good part is that we can now also bevel them nicely, which we could not do before, for example. So that means we can go into it and we can use the bevel tool and get a bit of geometry out of it.